Hello and welcome to Tuesday's Holy Week devotion. My name's David. I'm one of the pastors here at Clear Branch, and I'm here to continue this series as we go through this walk through Mark's Gospel that's speaking about the last week of Jesus' life before his crucifixion and then his resurrection. So today's scripture is taken from Mark chapter 11, and it's beginning with verse 27, and here we're finding Jesus in Jerusalem. And this is probably the day after he has cleared the temple of money changers, which was what Addie talked about yesterday in our devotion. So let's read the scripture together. It's Mark chapter 11, verses 27 through 33. And they came again to Jerusalem. And as he was walking in the temple, the chief priests and the scribes and the elders came to him, and they said to him, "By what authority do you do these things?" Talking about clearing the temple. "Or who gave you this authority to do them?" And Jesus said to them, "I'll ask you one question. Answer me, and I will tell you by what authority I do these things. Was the baptism of John," speaking of John the Baptist, "from heaven or from man? Answer me." And they discussed it with one another, and saying, "If we say from heaven, he will say, then why did you not believe him? But shall we say from man?" They were afraid of the people, for they all held that John was really a prophet. So they answered Jesus, "We do not know." And Jesus said to them, "Neither will I tell you by what authority I do these things." So these religious leaders that were coming up and challenging Jesus, these were some of the same people who had been challenging him for quite some time. They had been at odds with Jesus' teachings, and now that he had taken a step further and actually cleared the temple, taken out the money changers, this was a big challenge to them. You know, after all, they were the ones who were supposed to be in charge of the temple, in charge of all religious affairs, and Jesus now is usurping their authority. He's taken it away from them. And so they have this difficulty, and they want to try to settle this once and for all. So Jesus, tell us, where does your authority come from to do these things? After all, we're the ones who have the real authority. And like Jesus often does, he answers their question with a question. He said, "Answer me, we'll be fine. Do you believe," this is basically what his question was, "do you believe John the Baptist was actually a prophet from God or not?" Well, if they said yes, he was a prophet from God, then his teachings about Jesus being the Messiah would have to be right, and Jesus would have all the authority. But if they said, "No, we didn't actually believe him to be a prophet," well, then they knew that the people would rise up, because the people, just the public, knew in their hearts that John was a prophet from God. And so these religious leaders would probably lose their power, lose their authority. And so this was a no-win situation for them. Jesus knew that. So when they came back and pleaded ignorance and said, "We don't know," Jesus said, "Fine. You're not going to answer me truthfully? I don't have to answer you either." So here's the thing. As we read through the Gospels, we see all of the miracles that Jesus did. We read his teachings. We see how he handled opposition. And it's obvious, as we read it, that Jesus got his authority from being one with God. So why couldn't these religious leaders, who were supposed to be the experts, they knew all the Old Testament prophecies, they knew, why couldn't they see as easily as we do that Jesus was the Messiah, the one with authority? Well, they should have known. Maybe they did. But the reality is that, like us, they didn't want to surrender their power, their authority, or their control to Jesus. Accepting him as the Messiah would have meant that he was the one who was in charge. It would have meant surrendering that power, that authority. And so as I read this, I begin to think about my tendency to want to hold on to certain parts of my life and not surrender them to Jesus. And the reality of it is, as I do that, I'm doing the same thing that the religious leaders did in this account from Mark. I'm questioning Jesus' authority to be in control of my life. Now, we think badly of the religious leaders as we read the story. They're the bad guys. We think badly of them because they ultimately weren't willing to give their control over to Jesus. Isn't that what we do? Isn't the fact that we're not willing to cede our authority over our lives to Jesus, questioning his authority and questioning his ability to actually do it better than we do? So this week, as we're continuing through Holy Week, and as we go through these other devotions, but not just that, as we're contemplating the sacrifice that Jesus made for us, as we're contemplating our place in relationship to his, how about if each of us think about whether or not we're questioning Jesus' authority or his ability to be in control of our lives? Or are we recognizing him for who he is, the one who can truly make us whole?